This is your daily dose of all things royal.
It started like the humongous surge of regulation happened in the aftermath of Enron. It surged again in the aftermath of the great financial crisis, and it became proper dystopian central planning with the Great Reset in the wake of COVID through the WEF.
I am most touched that Professor Klaus Schwab should have invited me to be with you as we mark the 50th anniversary of the World Economic Forum and its mission to improve the state of the world. It is this mission and the urgent need to shape the next 50 years that has inspired me to be with you here today. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are in the midst of a crisis that is now, I hope, well understood. Global warming, climate change, and the devastating loss of biodiversity are the greatest threats humanity has ever faced, and one largely of our own creation. In order to secure our future and to prosper, we need to evolve our economic model. Everything I've tried to do and urge over the past 50 years has been done with our children and grandchildren in mind, because I did not want to be accused by them of doing nothing except prevaricate and deny the problem. Now, of course, they are accusing us of exactly that. So put yourselves in their position, ladies and gentlemen. We simply cannot waste any more time. The only limit is our willingness to act. And the time to act is now.
5 years later.
And then, what was found out, because remember, the Great Reset, this is like the second coming of Klaus Schwab, happens in 2020. And this is where the WEF agenda becomes completely mainstream. That is 2020. Today is 2025. We can see the economic data. We can see the results. When I was in the room, and I was part of the World Economic Forum up until December 2024, I would always say, but you guys are driving net zero. You're saying that renewable energy is cheaper. You're saying this will save money for businesses and the consumer. Actually, the opposite is happening. Energy prices have gone up. Renewable energy, actually, as an investment, hasn't done well. The only deals that worked out is because taxpayers subsidized it. You don't know where they're coming from. And what I can say is this: they are totally detached from, the outcomes they're driving.
This is the largest gathering of global leadership of the post-COVID period of time. For many people, this meeting feels out of step with the moment. We hear all about the elites. And how does that play out in an age of populism? How does an established institution make a difference in an era of deep institutional mistrust? And there's some truth to the critique. I believe in this forum for a long time. I certainly wouldn't be leading this if I didn't believe that we can change and make the world better. But it's also obvious that the world now places far less trust in us to help shape what comes next. If the World Economic Forum is going to be useful going forward, it has to regain that trust.
To pretend that you're helping ordinary people and small businesses is through more regulation. So you have more government coming in with the same script, pretending it has reformed. It doesn't. What it does do, it creates an unleveled field.
Mine is the first visit of a Canadian Prime Minister to China in nearly a decade. The world has changed much since that last visit. And I believe the progress that we have made in the partnership sets us up well for the new world order.
We understand that this rupture calls for more than adaptation. It calls for honesty about the world as it is. We are taking the sign out of the window. We know the old order is not coming back. We shouldn't mourn it.
Having a place like Europe, which sometimes is too slow, for sure, and needs to be reformed, for sure, but which is predictable, loyal, and where you know that the rule of the game is just the rule of law, it's a good place. And I think this is a good place for today and for tomorrow. So we will be committed during 2026 to try to deliver this global agenda. China is welcome, but what we need is more Chinese foreign direct investment in Europe, in some key sectors, to contribute to our growth, to transfer some technologies, and not just to export towards Europe some devices or products which sometimes don't have the same standards or are much more subsidized as the one being produced in Europe.
People want to join the European Union. Yes. Nobody wants to join China. Nobody, no neighbor of the United States says, well, we want to join the United States. Nobody wants to. They want to join the European Union just because we have respect. We have the rule of law. We do speak softly.
President Trump and a lot of people who agree with him condemn globalism a lot. And I suspect, you would be the kind of epitome of a globalist. You worked for Goldman Sachs, I believe. You were a central banker. You're comfortable and lived in several countries. Is globalism, first of all, is it a thing, and is it over?
I think, well, look, understanding how the world works, having appreciation for other cultures, understanding the connections, and being able to, or at least appreciating ways that how we connect, whether it's through technology, trade, and
I was on a futures council. I was in a room with leading experts at the World Economic Forum, from academia, from business, from the public sector. All they want to do is all they think about is a job enrichment scheme. More regulation, the more the vested interest groups make. Off of this ESG movement, you have to understand this is a multi-trillion-dollar industry. It is highly profitable. And again, what drives it, it's the regulations, right? And then with more regulation, you bring in more lawyers, more consultants, more data providers. The banks get to restructure deals. There are all these bells and whistles attached. You get, by the way, to charge more. If you're going to save the planet, you're saying to the market, guess what? I have to charge you more.
And right after Davos, the next weekend, I will travel to India. There's still work to do, but we are on the cusp of a historic trade agreement. Indeed, some call it the mother of all deals. One that would create a market of 2 billion people, accounting for almost a quarter of global GDP. And crucially, that would provide a first-mover advantage for Europe, with one of the world's fastest growing and most dynamic continents. Europe wants to do business with the growth centers of today and the economic powerhouses of this century, from Latin America to the Indo-Pacific and far beyond. Europe will always choose the world, and the world is ready to choose Europe.
It's concentration of the big players, increasing systemic risk, therefore always demanding balance, right? Too big to fail. That's what it manufactures, yes.
Can I bring you back to Greenland?
No. It's unnecessary. It's the Western Hemisphere is vital for the United States of America. Our national security people are on it, and they care about it, and I'm going to leave it to them to address with our allies, with our friends, and with everyone how they work it out. But the Western Hemisphere matters to the United States of America, and the United States of America, as I've just articulated, really, really matters to the world. When America shines, the world shines, because they all need to make sure America is strong and powerful to take care of them, God forbid. And so I think America and the Western Hemisphere are vital to America, and I'm going to leave that to my national security people to address.
Right. The rest of us, I think, are finding it harder to make that kind of separation clearly. And I would be curious to know how the representatives of the UK and Canada might want to think about these issues. Do you see them as starkly divided, as Secretary Lucknick would like us to have them? Does this logic of what's good for America is good for the world convince in this extraordinarily strong, extremely eloquent expression that we've just heard?
You go first.
Thank you. Thanks, Francois. Lovely.
We're friends.
So I'm very struck by and taken by the idea of putting your own country first and considering your own security and resilience. I think it's about 3 years ago now that I gave a speech where I coined the term securonomics.
I'm very struck by and taken by the idea of putting your own country first and considering your own security and resilience.
President Trump is acting like an international gangster, threatening to trample over the sovereignty of an ally, threatening the end of NATO altogether, and now threatening to hit our country and 7 European allies with outrageous, damaging tariffs unless he gets his hands on Greenland. This is an incredibly grave moment for the United Kingdom, Europe and our world. Without provocation or justification, the President of the United States is attacking our economy, our livelihoods and our national security. Trump has put British businesses and jobs on the front line in his unprovoked aggression. The only people cheering him on are Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. Only a few months ago, Trump hailed the special relationship at Windsor Castle. Now, thanks to his actions, it is nearly in tatters. So how do we stop Trump's damaging trade war? For a year now, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister has tried a policy of appeasing Trump, flattering him, fawning over him, refusing to stand up to him, because, he argued, otherwise Trump would hit us with damaging tariffs. Well, the Prime Minister has tested his approach to destruction. It has failed. It is time for the government to change course. We have to finally be clear-eyed about the sort of man Trump is and treat him accordingly. He is a bully. He thinks he can grab whatever he wants, using force if necessary. And he is corrupt. The most corrupt president the United States has ever seen. So there are only 2 ways of getting him to back down: bribing him with a new jet perhaps, or a few billion in his crypto account, or standing up to him like we would with any other bully, standing together with our European allies to make him back down. That's the choice. Which one, Foreign Secretary?
Securing the Arctic from Russian threats is important to you. Why are you upset about NATO allies thinking that, more seriously in Greenland by holding military exercises?
Well, that wasn't a military. They sent a few people. And they say they sent them not for me, but to guard against Russia. But, NATO's been warning Denmark for about 20 years now, longer than that, 25 years. They've been warning Denmark about the Russian threat. And it's not only Russia, it's also China. So we'll see what happens. But let's put it this way. It's going to be a very interesting Davos. Goodbye, everybody. Have a good flight. Thank you.
Rather than address the issue, capitalism wasn't the problem. It was cronyism, bad incentives, lack of accountability. Instead, you're able to paper over it through process and procedure. And that's why with the GFC, you have big businesses actually supporting Dodd-Frank and continuing to support regulations. Exactly what you say is that suddenly you're looking, if you're a big JP Morgan, a big multinational, you're like, wow, through more regulation, the barrier to entry is so much higher, right? We can afford this. We can absorb all of these costs. and then we can hoover up at a dirt cheap price our smaller competitors. That's exactly what's going on. The massive compliance cost is passed on to the consumer, and small businesses can't afford this, all the cost that it's cost. So you now have the elite, right, becoming more powerful. Only big companies can afford this. And so this is starting in 2002. It's like when like the small guy, right, where just ordinary people are like looking around like, huh, what just happened here? I can't afford to run my business. I supported this, but actually in practice, I can't implement it. And that's the problem. You have more and more regulation. It warps competitive markets. Financial flows move to different areas, and the strong are favored.
The ban on institutional investors in single-family homes, for those of you who are not American, in the U.S., pre-Great Financial Crisis, institutional investors did not participate in the single-family market. So post the financial crisis, institutional investors hoovered up single-family homes. They continue to do it, and there's an unfair tax arbitrage there. You and I have a mortgage. We can deduct the mortgage amount. Institutional investors can deduct the borrowing amount, but they can also expense any repairs and depreciation. So we think that it is a good idea to have them out of the market. We are going to give guidance at some point to see what is a mom and pop that someone, maybe your parents for their retirement, bought 5, 10, 12 homes. So we don't want to push the mom and pops out. We just want to push everyone else out. And what's important here, you will hear some misinformation that says, well, institutional investors are 1%, 2%, 3%. That is true. Having been in markets for 35 or 40 years, markets are made on the margin, and institutional investors are much higher in boomtown markets like Charlotte, like Atlanta, like Huntsville, Alabama. So they've done that. In terms of having Fannie and Freddie buy MBS,
when I talk about this multi-trillion-dollar industrial complex, you have to understand like how deep it goes. So you've got, they're called like the proxy voting companies, ISS and Glass Lewis, telling shareholders what drives profitability is the WEF agenda, is the Davos agenda. It's companies pledging net zero, and it's DEI. So you've got on these, for these companies, they're under so much pressure, right? There's an outcry in the world. Remember, this is mainly happening during a lot of social unrest during COVID, right? Or in the aftermath. And you've got the subversion already of the capital markets of the WEF agenda. And so a CEO sitting at BP or Shell, and again, like this is, across the pond, it's even more severe, the ESG movement, they buckle under it and they just say, okay, we have to pander to the public, right? So just say anything, fine. We know that this is loss-making, but fuck it. We can just divert some money into green hydrogen, more offshore wind, and we make these announcements. No one will know. These are long-term projects. And all we need to do is, remember, companies are driven by a 90-day earnings call cycle. We just have to announce it and our share price goes up, right? And we get paid more money. No one's going to know. So that's what happened. This short-termism comes up and there's no accountability. No one's calling this out. Right? The backlash doesn't really start until about 2022. And of course, today, we see very clearly the results. If you look at financial performance of U.S. oil majors like Exxon and Chevron versus the European and the UK oil majors, it's night and day because the US oil majors pandered less to the Davos agenda. They still did, but they weren't as captured by ESG as their peers across the pond in Europe. And you can see that financial performance and stock performance is night and day. ESG loses money, right? There's no doubt about that. It loses money. It blurs the line between business and government. Businesses, the best thing that they can do is just stay in their lane and make good products and services and make sure they run their businesses. That was the contract. They took in outside money from shareholders, and their contract is to optimize profitability. Their objective is not to go on far-fetched boondoggles and save penguins or polar bears. That's not part of their remit. And that is value destruction that not only distracts the company, you in fact lose money. And that's what happened in the energy sector.
Well, I think you should start at a much higher level.
Okay.
We are in Davos at the World Economic Forum. And the Trump administration and myself, we are here to make a very clear point. Globalization has failed the West and the United States of America. It's a failed policy. It is what the WEF has stood for, which is export, offshore, far shore, find the cheapest labor in the world, and the world is a better place for it. The fact is, it has left America behind. It has left the American workers behind. And what we are here to say is that America First is a different model, one that we encourage other countries to consider, which is that our workers come first. We can have policies that impact our workers. Sovereignty is your borders. You're entitled to have borders. You shouldn't offshore your medicine. You shouldn't offshore your semiconductors. You shouldn't offshore your entire industrial base and have it be hollowed out beneath you. You should not be dependent for that which is fundamental to your sovereignty on any other nation. And if you're going to be dependent on someone, it darn well better be your best allies. Okay? And so that is a different way of thinking. It is completely different than the WEF. I viewed the WEF as not a flagpole in the middle, but in fact, they are the flag. Whichever way the wind blew, so it blew. You should have solar, you should have wind. Why are you going to do solar and wind? Why would Europe agree to be net zero in 2030 when they don't make a battery? They don't make a battery. So if they go 2030, they are deciding to be subservient to China, who makes the batteries.
What we're here to say is that America First is a different model.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
It's a moment of uncertainty, but also possibility. Not a moment to retreat, but a moment to rise. The World Economic Forum is not about responding to current events. It's about orchestrating the right conditions that enable us to move forward.
We will not allow our territory to be violated. After 4 long years, the United States is strong and sovereign and a beautiful nation once again. It's a strong, sovereign nation. In addition, I'm pleased to report that America is also a free nation once again. On day one, I signed an executive order to stop all government censorship. No longer will our government label the speech of our own citizens as misinformation or disinformation, which are the favorite words of censors and those who wish to stop the free exchange of ideas and, frankly, progress. We have saved free speech in America, and we've saved it strongly. My administration has taken action to abolish all discriminatory diversity, equity, and inclusion nonsense, and these are policies that were absolute nonsense throughout the government and the private sector.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for that very powerful speech. And I think you could hear the applause all the way from Davos to the White House. But next year it will be even better, because then you can get the applause here in Davos. So we wish you welcome to our village next year. We hope to see you.
Thank you very much.